And now, milk-skinned evil pups, economic suburban hermits, homogenous, throbbing with schadenfreude, examining their reflections for signs of deification. It's time for Blue-Eyed Monster.
So?
What did you think?
It's like that dream you had the other night, the one you told me about.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it's kinda like you just typed out that dream.
A bit, but...
Well, it is like exactly the same.
But what did you think?
Of the dream?
Of the story?
I don't know, it's kinda...
What?
It's kinda like if someone was trying to make up a dream. Like if there was a dream sequence in a soap opera or something. Like if daytime TV tried to do a fruity, daily-esque dream bit.
Daytime TV?
Yeah, but you know what I mean, right? It's just a bit badly written.
My dream, or are we talking about the story now?
I dunno, both.
Well, I didn't write my dream, I just wrote the story.
Whatever, I'm just trying to be 100% honest. Honest feedback, that's what you want, isn't it?
I don't know. Maybe there's a better ratio. Like maybe feedback should be like 75% truth and 25 white lies.
That's bullshit. Also, white lie is racist. And now you're angry?
No, I hoped you'd like it.
You're sulking. Well, why? I mean, if you're a writer, why don't you write? Like, make something up, don't just type up a dream.
It's hard. I guess I was hoping my subconscious had the creativity I'm lacking when I'm awake, but it turns out my subconscious is just as shitty a writer as I am. That's where you're meant to say, you're not a shitty writer.
I've got to go.
Why?
Work.
You can work here on your laptop.
No, it's a good paying job and I need to concentrate.
What is it?
A girl I went to school with got married and the guy had a fight a few days before, and she wants me to get rid of his black eye before they put the photos on Instagram. Also, she has a tattoo of her ex's name she's getting removed, but she wants it gone in the photos.
Everybody's Stalin nowadays. Maybe that's my problem. I'm too honest. I mean, writing is kinda like lying, I suppose. Maybe that's why I'm no good.
Hashtag humblebrag.
Don't say hashtag.
Fuck you.
Wait, don't go.
Fuck you, you arrogant, talentless, dream transcribing piece of shit. That's the last time I read any of your shit. I'm leaving.
Please don't go. I'm sorry. You fucking idiot, Daniel. You fucking idiot.
It was in the supermarket in the building that was once a brewery. but now housed an official Apple reseller and a yoga studio, as well as the supermarket. He was trying to decide whether to buy the Swedish bread with the holes in it. They reminded him of a rash, or the normal sliced wholemeal bread when he heard the sound. It sounded like a bone cracking, but he felt no immediate physical pain. And after a quick inspection, a mental pat-down, none of his bones appeared to be broken. He was, however, sure that the sound had come from somewhere within his own body, and it was a violent sound. It was the sound of some part of him breaking. The mystery in diagnosing the source and cause of the sound was the lack of pain. There was not even a twinge to help him begin his investigation. There was nothing, no pain at all. He put the bread back on the shelf and took a moment to consider. Normally his body had a very good sense of its own internal geography, but this cracking sound seemed to come from some undiscovered organ or space, unmistakably internal but not yet mapped by his body's own sense of itself. Suddenly, in a moment, his body had become a stranger, a separate entity with a secret, perhaps even an agenda. He didn't know how to move forward. What steps, if any, should he take? He was to all intents and purposes the same man who had entered the supermarket with the intention of buying bread and milk and a new set of sponges. So what the fuck was wrong? He bought the normal sliced wholemeal bread and paid for his shopping and left the supermarket, with every intention of getting on with his life as if nothing had happened. Outside he suddenly felt very faint. His mind was filled with the most intense confusion, a storm of dislodged thoughts. He sat down on a bench between two red-faced tramps. They passed a can of super-strength lager between them, and he stared into his bag of shopping, and it seemed to him like an infinite pit, bored straight through the middle of the earth itself. After a moment of staring into the shopping bag, he realised that he was in fact real, that he did exist, that he was an adult, and that he was terrified of himself and the future, and of the creeping terror of the day-to-day. In that moment he interrupted the flow of the can between the two tramps and snatched it, draining it of its contents and crumpling it in one movement. The tramps yelped at him, their two voices complementing each other and seeming momentarily melodic, with the taste of super-strength lager still lapping at his lips. Just then, a child slipped in a puddle. The fear of death flashed across the mother's face, but the child was fine. He took some coins out of his pocket and pressed them into the palm of one of the tramps. Relieved of the guilt he felt he should feel for stealing the can of beer, he walked away and got on with his life. A few months after the episode in the supermarket, he got a better job and no longer had to worry or even think about whether he bought foreign exciting bread or the regular kind of bread beloved of bachelors. While travelling abroad for work, he met a woman in a queue of one of those expensive but still essentially cheap eateries by the side of a motorway. She was trying to decide if she'd buy the chocolate croissant or the normal croissant. He offered to buy whichever she didn't and they could share. During the first few conversations they had, he told a number of lies that he spent the next 10 years regretting and carefully covering up, even though they were quite minor, including some foolish half-baked story about a serious illness he'd had as a child. That one caused him the most hassle. For years he had to cut his parents off in mid-sentence in front of her, lest they slip up and give the game away. Although he regretted these lies, he didn't stop lying. In fact, the older he got, the more he lied, to himself and to others. After just a few months she moved in with him, Before they could even get married and finish her visa application, she got pregnant. A few hours after she told him the news, he woke up in a cold sweat and went to the bathroom. He sat in the toilet, and he thought about the sound, and he cursed that it hadn't been the sound of his fertility snapping, as he'd often hoped and wished, when his mind wandered back to that day in the supermarket, and pondered the meaning of that terrible sound. To distract himself from this critical moment in his life, which in the same way as that moment outside the supermarket, seemed to shake his head with a brutal kind of immediacy, a horrible real nowness that screamed for recognition, he read the ingredients on the back of the can of deodorant. When he came out of the toilet, she asked him if he was okay, and not wanting to know what he'd really been thinking about, he went back to the well-rehearsed lie from his childhood and told her he felt sick. She insisted he go to the doctor for a checkup. Sitting in front of the doctor with no real illness to talk about, and with the growing suspicion that she knew it, he began to tell her about that day in the supermarket and that devil sound. She asked him to lie down, and pressed an implement into his chest that looked like something someone would make up if they were trying to make something that looked like an implement but was in fact to manifest nothing. A bullshit. A physical version of a made-up technical term from a sci-fi book. He was convinced she thought he was full of shit, making it up and intent on taunting him with the knowledge. She pressed her ear against the implement, and they both waited for a painfully long silence, listening to his heartbeat, which got faster and faster the longer she kept her ear pressed to that implement pressed to his chest. Eventually she had enough of listening to his heartbeat, and she removed the implement and went over and sat down at her desk. She told him everything seemed fine, then told him in plain terms that she thinks he made the whole incident in the supermarket up, or maybe just misremembered it. While writing up a referral that they both knew he'd never use, she began to monologue about the inaccuracy of human memory, about the absurdity of witness testimony still being the basis of our judicial system, and something about repressed memory and the satanic panic scare of the early 90s. Despite everything, he left the office with the impression that she was a good doctor. He would recommend her to both family and friends. His daughter was born prematurely but healthy. Some people used the word miracle in his presence after her birth, but the word sounded absurd to him. Her birth, and many of the important stages in her life that followed, failed despite his best and most earnest efforts to evoke anything like the feeling he'd had sat on the toilet or in the supermarket years earlier. Similar episodes did, however, reoccur, sometimes at times of seeming importance, like the first time they found a cancerous growth in his lower intestine, but also at times of seeming irrelevance, like when he'd be shaving or eating frozen pizza, or failing to be a good parent to his children, a good husband to his wife. These moments were like internal earthquakes, moments of severe reality, unfiltered raw, yet he never really deduced a proper reaction to them, and in many ways these episodes, these attacks, dictated the flow of his life. They were always accompanied by the echoing of that cracking sound inside his head. One night he woke to a sound which he at first assumed was that devil crack returning to finally finish him off, but then realised it was something else, something far more terrestrial and mortal. It was the sound of a fist banging on the front door of his house. He got out of bed and pulled back the curtain and peered outside into the shadowy street below. A man with a head like a light bulb was angrily pounding his fist on the door. He was perspiring from the effort. Big drops of sweat made his light bulb head glisten under the illumination provided by the lampposts. He didn't recognise the man, and waited until the man took a moment to gather his breath before opening the window and poking his head outside. The man looked up at him. He had angry eyes and they shared a moment of eye contact before he returned to pounding on the door, now adding in the occasional kick for good measure. His wife woke up and asked what was going on. She joined him by the window, and he waited as she looked down at the man with the head like a light bulb, half expecting her to say that she knew him, that he was her secret lover, or a former secret lover, or a future secret lover. But she just went back to bed and rolled over and told him to call the police, which he did. When the man with the head like the light bulb heard the police car coming, he walked away, and he never saw him again. The next morning he removed the imprint of the sole of the man's boot from the front door with some hot water and a wet sponge. He died never understanding the inside of his own head, and never having found that mysterious organ from which that devil crack originated. He died surrounded by his family, with his wife and children and their children, all of whom had forgiven him for his failures, but to whom he'd never really confessed that he didn't consider them failures, more like blemishes, like the spot that appears in the same place on your face every day, but you know there's nothing you can do about, and so eventually give up trying. As he was dying, he strained his ears, expecting to hear the sound or an echo of the sound, to have some moment of shuddering realness of, holy shit, this is it, Batman, type realization, an epiphany. But nothing came. He just died, to all extents and purposes, a happy man who spent far too long thinking about a moment in a supermarket years ago when he heard something break that he never found broken, and maybe, just maybe, wasted a lot of fucking time.
Delayed Flight Number EZI 8956 by Daniel Brownstone Smith. It was a strange kind of plane. It had rotor blades and a fish-like fin. Inside it was like a hotel from the 80s. Wood paneling and everyone had big hair and was smoking. The pilot and the crew were all midgets. The windows were not windows but mirrors. Mirrors and sometimes screens, but not good screens. Cheap office PC monitor screens. My girlfriend was there. She was wearing the low-cut dress that my auntie wore that Christmas when she got too drunk and accidentally flashed the nipples of her newly done fake tits at all us kids. She was drunk and angry because the operation had gone wrong and the nipples had slipped. They were uneven and as hard as crisps, she said. When my girlfriend spoke, it was with my mother's voice. That made my teeth fall out and the whole plane began to melt away as I stood up and walked to the toilet. In the toilet there were many more mirrors with liquid surfaces. They rippled in spirals into infinity. I tried to gather the falling teeth in palms of my hands which had eyes in them. When I looked in the mirror, I was both old and young. Fresh and hideous, a baby and a hag. There was a loud knocking at the door. When I opened it, it was that Frankenstein being, half my mother, half my girlfriend. She had a snake in her hand which she said she had to kill because it had tried to bite her. When I looked down, I had no penis. The end.
Oh, Brian, I didn't see you there. What are you doing in the cellar? I'm just getting a bottle of wine from my secret stash. We've got guests over. Susan's job share and his partner. Susan's cooking. She's a wonderful cook. Well, nice seeing you, Brian. I better get going. Oh, what's that on the walls? Did your kids do those? Oh, they're nice. Very nice. Like cave paintings. Like those caves in France. Yeah, very nice. Have you seen that Herzog documentary? It's really good. You should check it out. So what are they? A little summer holiday project for the kids? Keep them busy and brighten things up round here. I always thought the cellar looked a bit gloomy. What's that, Brian? Next to those animals and weird creatures. Brian? Is that my wife, Brian? Is that my wife, Brian? Is that Susan? Brian? Is that my fucking wife? Is that Susan? Brian? Is that my fucking wife? Is that my fucking wife, Brian? And what are those things? What are those creatures? Are those insects? But what are those antlers? Brian? Brian? What are those paintings, Brian? What are those symbols? And what's that thing doing to my wife? Brian? You sick fucking bastard! Brian!
That was lactating lips, creme de la creme, democratic cosmopolitan urbanites, rocking with fear, examining their intestines for signs of defecation. That was Blue-Eyed Monster